When we're young, we have an amazing, positive outlook about how great life is going to be, but somewhere along the line, we forget to dream and end up settling. Join Up Dots features amazing people who refuse to give up and chose to go after their dreams. This is your blueprint for greatness. So here's your host, live from the back of his garden in the UK, David Ralph.
Yes, hello there. Good morning, everybody. How are we in Join Up Dots land? I hope you're okay. Episode 148. And today's one is going to be a great one because I've already been talking to the chap and I just know it is going to be a fun-filled hour of conversation, motivational chat and inspirational content. So, have you ever been on a school trip to a museum and after the initial, we're out of school wore off, found the whole thing a bit boring? Loads and loads of statues, stuffed animals, or those tiny little plaques that you have to read, which you start off with the best intentions of reading them all, and then start gazing at them with blank eyeballs all the time, wondering why you ate your sandwiches so early. Well, I know that I have. And so it's with great regret for me personally, but a huge delight for the people of New York, that one man's taking it on himself to bring these institutions to life for the latest generation. Yep, like Ben Stiller in the Night of the Museum films, he, alongside his colleagues, run daily tours through the Met and the Museum of Natural History, acting scenes, telling stories, and generally making it all fun. As he says on his site, Museum Hacks, he loves nothing more than when someone says to him, "That was the most fun I've ever had in a museum." But like all overnight success stories, he is one of stumbles and falls, successes and failures, not least working for 8 years in his family business, making a film of him and his dad in Thailand. I'll have to sort of delve into that one. And even appearing in the Oscar-nominated, record-shattering American Pie 2. Okay, he may not have won him an Oscar, and actually his scene didn't end up in the film either. So let's find out how Museum Hack come together, and what was it like working for his parents for 8 years. And of course, the most important thing, can he still remember the famous lines that now only appear on the American Pie 2 director's cut? Well, let's find out as we bring onto the show to start joining up dots, the one and only Mr. Museum, Nick Gray. How are you, Nick?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for that fantastic introduction. I'm so glad to be here for your listeners.
Well, it's not often that we have an Oscar-nominated actor.
Listen, I have to be very forthcoming. My tiny little deleted scenes, it was like a one-line performance. I am not an actor and I've never taken classes. That's a funny story where as a nerdy kid in high school, I kind of weaseled my way all the way from the sticks of North Georgia. I got onto the set of that movie.
So how did you do that? Because, I've made a few films in my time, Nick, being adults, you know what I mean? But I've never had any lines to say in them. So how did you actually manage to get yourself on a film set and actually get some lines? Because from what I understand, actors generally get walk-on parts and they do sort of holding a plate in the background and all those kind of things. And you actually got lines. How did you do it?
I was incredibly lucky in that the film's producers were very welcoming to fan-based internet. What that means is I actually got a bootleg copy of the movie that I downloaded online, and I loved the movie so much, I was a high school student, that I created my own fan website for it. This is like a crazy story, but I just created a fan website. I wanted to talk about the stars and the story because I knew it was going to hit the theaters and be a real big deal. And the producers and the writer and some of the stars just thought that this was the weirdest / coolest thing ever. And I was a very nerdy high school student. I barely got a date to my senior prom. And that was kind of what this movie at the time really resonated with me. And they thought I was a curious case. We became friends, and when the second or third movie came around, I was invited to come out and visit the set. And the director thought it would be funny to put me in a scene, and that's how it happened.
So, right, this is the big build-up, okay?
Oh, my gosh, uh-oh.
Can you remember your 6 lines?
Can I remember? Of course. I think about it. No, I do know the line. Do you want to know the line?
Yeah, so set the scene. So what's happening? Remembering this is a family show, so if there's anything untoward going, kind of suggest it, but set the scene.
I'm flattered that you're asking me about this. I never talk about this part of my life with my New York City friends, and most of them would have no clue that I had this. But if you remember from the American Pie movies, there was a gentleman named Stifler.
Yes, I do.
Stifler was kind of like the bad boy. He was hilarious. There was a scene in the second movie where they're having a party at Stifler's house. His parents are out of town. And during this party, all the main characters are catching up and having a beer. And then a guy runs through the party yelling, screaming, "The cops, the cops, the cops." The camera cuts to me, and it's my close-up, and I say, "Dude, the cops? What the hell?"
And was that exactly as you did it, or did you do an accent, or?
That was exactly as I did it. Wow, I'm sweating.
You're not surprised it ended up on the director's floor then, are you? If
I'm not surprised.
If that's the kind of effort level you put into it, I would have done it as like a Mexican or added some kind of James Bond villain spark.
I'm cracking up. I think you would have done much better than I have. I'm going to call you next time and get your actors coaching. You may have a business in you for coaching of actors, David.
Well, especially villains. They're always, English people are villains, aren't they, in films? They're always baddies.
They are often villains. Why is that?
I've got no idea. I was wondering, now you've been in sort of Hollywood, why are all villains? And it's either, we're either kind of James Bond spies or we're going to blow up a building. It's always that.
I completely agree. The British people are always wealthy as well. British people are always spies or devious or businessmen. They're very sharp. I think that you got the wind at your back on this one.
And good in bed as well. Believe me. Right, okay. So let's sort of move away from that line and actually sort of delve in, because it has been one of those kind of lives that when I've been looking at it, I thought, yeah, I can kind of see the dots here. I can see how it's joined up. It's a kind of fascinating step by step by step. Obviously, now you're in the museum doing your thing, which we're going to touch on a little bit later. But there's been a theatrical side to you, hasn't there? There hasn't been a kind of normal 9-to-5 person, even though you spent 8 years working with your mum and dad in a sort of 9-to-5 job. There seems to be somebody aiming for the unusual in you all the time.
I was in the comedy troupe on my college campus. The name of the comedy troupe was the Lilting Banshees. And in America, we have a lot of fraternities and sororities. And this was kind of like the renegade fraternity, where we would put on shows and we would make parodies. And that experience of standing up on stage in front of people, I didn't have any theater experience in high school, but for me, I do look back on that very fondly.
Well, was it scary when you did that?
I think it was very scary. It was very scary for me. And seeing everybody up there, but you kind of just fake it till you make it, right?
Well, is that something that you actually cling to, that phrase? Because it seems to be a kind of 50-50 split. Some people hate that because they say, why should you fake it until you make it? I.e., why shouldn't you just accept that you're not going to be very good at the beginning? And other people go, no, it's all about projecting that image that I am good so that people will buy into it and ultimately they will believe before I believe.
That's a great idea. I definitely believe in fake it till you make it with one caveat, and that is that you have to admit sometimes that you're faking it. And what I mean by that is these days people are very quick to sniff out fakers and people who are inflating themselves larger than they are. But as an example, if I'm speaking somewhere and I'm nervous, I'm more apt these days to say, oh man, I'm really nervous as I get up there, to sort of hedge a little bit, trying to pretend that I'm not nervous, but more embracing it. Short answer though is yeah, I definitely believe in faking it until you make it, to kind of gain the skills and the experience as you attempt the journey. Hey, that's how I started doing museum tours, right? I was not a trained museum tour guide.
So did you have to learn? Did you have to learn, did you have to walk around reading those little plaques that bore you after 15 minutes?
I absolutely had to learn, and there's so many smart museum people that came before me who did all the research and who gave the tours that I learned from. I fell in love with the museum. I don't come from a museum background, David. I used to think that museums were very boring, that the paintings don't have anything to do with me, that a lot of the stuff was stupid, it was overwhelming. I would leave the museum feeling tired or just not fulfilled. I'd leave the museum feeling guilty, like I didn't get out of it something that I was supposed to. And everything changed for me about 3 years ago when I had this incredible experience. Should I tell you about that?
You tell us, because that means I can sit back and savor this experience and not say anything.
Okay, good. It was about 3 years ago in New York City when a beautiful woman took me to the Metropolitan Museum of Art on a romantic date. It was our third date together. It was in the middle of December on a Saturday night, around 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. The Metropolitan Museum, it's in New York City. If you've never been there, it's the biggest museum in New York City. It's the most popular museum in America. It's the second most popular museum in the world. And yet, to many New Yorkers like me, it was just a tourist attraction. I didn't have a relationship with the space. I'd go there when my parents were in town. But anyhow, this woman brought me there, and she took me on a date, and she showed me her favorite sculpture and furniture and paintings, and I really liked it. I don't know if it was the lighting of the space that night, or that nobody was there, or if it was just having a very attractive woman talk to me. Perhaps.
There you go. You've nailed it. You've nailed the last one.
And that's what she was doing, right? She was talking to me about things that she was excited about. And for me, that changed everything. I love that experience. I started to go to the museum again and again and again. I was captivated by this idea of a space that for me could be a center of inspiration and really curiosity about history and art that I never had before. I would go to the museum, maybe have a glass of wine or two, and just sort of wander, stumble around and find my own way, do the museum's audio tours. I came up with the idea that I moved to New York City for things like that. I really like big cities, and maybe I was just going to dive bars or something. Nothing against dive bars on the weekend, but I said, I think I moved to New York, to a big city, for things like this. So I started to go there on my own, and eventually I started to lead tours there. And that's kind of a start of how I started to like museums.
Because I actually believe that Americans have actually ruined museums for everyone. Now, that might be...
I would love to hear about this. This is a very controversial topic. Please tell me.
It's a very controversial, but it's true. And as I'm the host of the show, it's going to be doubly true. No, I find if you come to the United Kingdom and you go around anything in the United Kingdom, any tourist attraction, it's pretty crap, to be honest. It hasn't moved on since the 70s. If you go to a museum, it's very much as you would imagine a boring museum. And if you go to a sort of attraction, you will just get a 70s waxwork standing there that's seen its better days, and nothing moves and nothing is animated or anything. Now, you go to America and you go to these theme parks and you go to, anything. Americans are brilliant at making things come alive, and they use robots and they make dinosaurs come alive and stuff. And I think that has kind of ruined museums. We like that. We like the movement. We like the fact that these things are roaring. We like the fact that it's so real that we almost feel that we're in it. Because I went to the Natural History Museum in London, and the most exciting bit was an animatronic T-Rex that just stood there and roared. And I thought, that's what I want. I want everything to come alive. And I think I have been seduced by the excitement that the Americans brilliantly do at their theme parks and wherever they go. And over here in the United Kingdom, it's become a bit rubbish. So I think that's what we need. I think we need you, of course, doing your thing, but I think we need the sort of, not a statue. We need something that looks like a statue but moves.
I like that essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is that theme parks and other things have essentially raised the bar. It's become like an arms race to capture your attention.
Spot on. I'm so thrilled by what I see at these theme parks, but everything else seems a bit humdrum. And I'm so excited. I remember going on years ago, first time I went to America, it was 1990. And the very first day, we steamed around to Universal Studios and I went on the Back to the Future ride. And it blew my mind. I couldn't believe that I was flying in this car. Now I look back on it and I kind of know how they did it. But it was just so amazing to me. And I think really that once your excitement level goes up to a certain part, it's got to keep on going up. It's almost like a drug. And then next time you go and you go onto the Back to the Future ride, you kind of think, oh, it's not as good as it used to be. But of course it is. It's just that you've seen even better things and more improvement and more exciting technology. And it's getting more and more real. I just think naturally we've kind of screwed ourselves up by giving ourselves better and better things that everything's got to sort of match up to.
You have nailed it exactly. That I think what you're saying is today you have to be entertained or you're not ready to be educated.
Yeah, so it wasn't controversial, was it? It was spot on.
Well, I think it was a little biased to blame everything on Americans, but yes, you were spot on. And I want to give a little bit of a caveat here to say that a lot of people in the museum world are doing really great things. Like we hear from people all the time at small museums and even at large ones who are doing good things. But you know what? I do believe that the vast majority of museums and especially of adult museum tours can no longer compete with everything else that is seeking audiences' attention. Things like Instagram, things like video games, television, movie theater, and theme parks. These days, audiences have said one thing to us. They say, if we are not entertained, then we're going to tune out. And so that's what we lead our tours with. We start with entertainment. We start with storytelling, fun games, cool photo activities. And the education and the art and the facts comes afterwards. And that's a very controversial idea in museums. I'm not saying that we're the exact right way to do it, but it has resonated with a very large audience.
I think the brilliant thing about what you're doing, though, is effectively you're doing something that looks great. And I've been looking at what you've been doing on your website. I'd love to go around a museum with you guys. It just looks fun because I'm going into that building expecting it to be rubbish. And then you're coming along and you're making my rubbish expectation brilliant. You know, and I think you're setting it out on a bar that the bulk of the population, especially adults that used to have to go around museums when they were just rubbish, you would entice me in. I'd go round that museum every single day with you, Nick, and it wouldn't have to be a romantic date on a Saturday night either.
Thank you so much for saying that. It's good to hear, and it's refreshing for me to hear from real citizens and real people who have had an experience maybe as a kid where maybe it was a negative experience and they just were very bored at the museum, and they've essentially written off that side of their life. They've said, I am not a museum person. I don't like them. I think that they are boring. I will go as a cultural obligation, but I do not leave them feeling inspired. And what we want to do is we want to bring you to the museum so that you can have fun, so that it opens you up to coming back. And hopefully you'll come back and maybe you'll develop a relationship. Maybe you won't, but we hope that you will. And the museum can be a place to inspire you with new ideas.
How do you integrate into that? Because I imagine when you guys came along, and there's quite a few of you, I was looking at your team of actors and warriors and musicians and God knows what that you have going around. I imagine there must have been an old guard in the museum who were just doing the tours as you always had. Some old guy with a big moustache that would walk around at a snail's pace telling you things. And so how did you actually manage to get in there and work side by side? Or was there like a turf war?
A turf war, like a throwdown between rival museum tour guide gangs.
That's a great film, isn't it?
And the audience
I'd give you more than 6 lines in that one.
Thank you. Museum Hack doesn't see ourselves as a replacement for the existing tours. Many museums have docents and volunteers that are at the core of their visitor services. We see ourselves as a supplement. And to be very clear, we are not officially employed by any of these museums. We operate as an outside tour vendor. So when you as a customer come, you could take a free museum tour, and they've got plenty of them at all the museums we operate at. But we make our money and we exist as a business because we sell a premium service. We sell a paid product that was otherwise free beforehand. We're a private company sort of working on top of the public sphere.
So if I went right back in time, and obviously you've been at college and you've been doing the comedy kind of thing and the sort of the acting up on stage, which you found scary. It seems bizarre to me in many ways that you then replicated that scariness. So is it something like, you get these like stand-up comedians that are really miserable on a daily basis, but they just had this drive to stand up on stage and make people laugh? Is there an entertainer in you, a kind of tortured soul entertainer that actually doesn't like doing it, but you know you've got to do it?
These questions are very humbling, and it's neat to think about. I wish everybody had the experience to look inward at that level. I think I'm a generally pretty happy person, and I love hosting social events for my friends. In New York City, I started to host these cocktail parties and loft parties, and that's kind of where these museum tours forked out of, was I wanted to get my friends together. So no, I don't think I'm a tortured soul who has a miserable life. I'm very thankful, and I've been very, very lucky.
Right, okay, so what's the big luckiness in your life that you would say? Where we class it as the big dot. And on the Join Up Dots timeline, quite often, it's something that is not a good time in your life. And it's forced you mentally and physically to take a leap and create your future, where if everything was comfortable in your life, you might have just kept on going, waiting for the next paycheck. So where was your big dot that actually made you become Nick Gray that I'm talking to today?
The thing that I've done most recently that I'm talking to you today about is the business called Museum Hack. And the big dot there that made me ultimately take the leap and focus full time to shift it from a hobby to my driving force and my passion every single day when I wake up was, and this is another, I guess, lucky thing. It's going to sound like a fancy thing, but I was working with an executive coach who, have you heard about these guys, or have you ever worked with one or met somebody who's an executive coach?
Sort of like a life coach, a professional coach.
Yeah, it's very similar to a life coach. This was used in the workplace. So they help you with your management skills, and usually they do a survey of people who report to you, and it's very much like a life coach, but it's all about workplace things. And I was working with an individual, his name was Dale, who was very helpful. And he started probing me with some questions. And these questions were very intense. These questions were simple questions like, what do you want? And why are you doing this? This meaning the job that I was doing at the time. And I would give a little bit of an answer, what do you want? I'd say something simple like money and power. And he would say, why do you want that? And I would think about it some more. And just very simple questions that if you listen to people that work well with others, all they do is ask questions, right? And as I thought about that, that was a big turning point for me, that as he helped me play out why I was doing certain things, and what would I do if money was no object, and what would I do if I could do anything, I said, I would do museum tours. I love giving these tours. I was doing these basically as a full-time hobby on the side, not for money, just for my friends. I worked 40, 50, 60 hours a week, but as soon as I was done working, I went straight to the museum and gave tours for free. And these conversations, also with some prodding and support for friends, really helped me make that jump. Does that answer your question?
Well, it does, but I'm kind of interested. Did your company pay for this man to come in?
The company did pay for the executive coach service, yes.
Because over here in the UK, if we had somebody come in who was basically asking you questions that were deep enough for you to consider your position at that company, that would be confusing, and that would be something that they obviously would take away from this. So the fact that he's in that position, did you think he was asking those questions because he'd been asked to ask them, or that he just saw something in you that he thought, actually, you're not a right fit for this company. This guy's like a coiled spring. He should be doing something else.
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't think that he was prodded at all to ask those questions. But when you're an individual working for your parents who has entrepreneurial tendencies, there are questions that arise, right? Like why are you doing this? Why aren't you doing your own thing? And those were some interesting questions to think about. I loved working for my family and loved working at that business. It's fantastic, and I'm thankful for that time. But the journey that I'm on right now, gosh, I maybe wish I would have done it a little bit sooner. I don't know.
Do you think you could have taken it to a different position? You know, because I'm actually going to ask you a question, because it was a question I thought of right at the very beginning, and then it came to me as you were saying that. If you know, I was going on my little bit of a rant about how Americans have ruined museums, and it's a quite accurate rant. If I gave you an infinite amount of money, would you recreate basically what I'm saying in a museum sort of sense, or would you take a museum and make it into like a theme park?
Wow, that's a unique idea. Would I make a museum into a theme park? It's an interesting idea. I think that some science museums are going in that direction. If you've ever been to like the Nemo Science Center in Amsterdam, I'm sure there's great ones in London and New York. Science museums and kids museums do a great job of doing that hands-on experience. If I had an unlimited amount of money, you know what? I just think that it's the live tour experience. Have you ever traveled to another city and hired a tour guide or gone on like a guided tour, maybe a food tour or something like that?
Yeah, I went to LA once, and a card was put under my door in a hotel room. I don't know why I even did this. And it was, I will take you around LA. I'm an insider in LA, and I will show you the things that you want to see. And this bald-headed chap turned up who had half of his head cut away at the back. And we had to sit looking at this huge gaping wound in the back of his head until we said to him, you know, how did you get that? I can't bear this anymore. How did you get that? And he said, oh, I was doing this tour one day, and then somebody just put a machete right into the back of my head. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. And he took us around LA and showed us the kind of the insider's view, the underground stuff, the kind of things that maybe LA didn't want us to see. So he kind of showed us, you know, where River Phoenix died and where this thing happened and where that thing happened. And I found it fascinating because it was one person's perspective, and it was not flavored by what they wanted me to see. It was flavored by what that person was presenting to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. It was that live experience of a human and a curated experience, right? I like that in museums. I'm very interested in the live tour guides and finding people who can communicate their passion and excitement about otherwise dry subjects, right? This is the whole very nature of why great teachers exist. I think everybody has fantastic memories about some teacher that they had growing up who did an incredible job explaining an otherwise dry subject. And now we're doing that just in museums in a different way.
Well, let's play you a speech now. This is one of our motivational speeches, and I'll be interested to see whether this has resonance to you. This is Jim Carrey.
My father could have been a great comedian, but he didn't believe that that was possible for him. And so he made a conservative choice. Instead, he got a safe job as an accountant. And when I was 12 years old, he was let go from that safe job, and our family had to do whatever we could to survive. I learned many great lessons from my father, not the least of which was that you can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance on doing what you love.
Well, that's what we're saying about you. But the interesting bit at the beginning is when he said, you know, he took a safe job. And I'm grappling with what you're doing at the moment because in some ways I think, well, this is safe. He's got people coming to the museums time and time and time and time again who are just set up to be bored. So he's got an audience ready for him. And so this business can't fail. But on the other side, I'm thinking, well, all businesses can fail unless he does it right. So was it a risk that you stepped into it? You're obviously doing something that you're passionate about, like Jim Carrey said, and it's something that you love doing. And you mentioned that you wake up first thing in the morning. But when you did take that leap of faith and you left your mum and dad's sort of business, was it scary, or did you sort of know, yeah, I'm really onto a good thing here?
It was very scary for me because I was leaving a reliable source of income that I wasn't going into. When I left my job, we weren't charging for museum tours yet. It was a big leap. That being said, I did do a lot to save up money beforehand to ensure that I could keep paying my rent and enjoy a somewhat comfortable living experience. The biggest risk that we had, I mean, if we're talking about risk, is when I first started to give tours, we didn't have permission to do the tours. I mean, in some aspects, we still don't really have permission to do the tours. And to me, that's very risky. To people working in museums, it's not just risky, it's downright blasphemous. Today, that speech was inspiring because I don't think I take enough risks, probably, right? I should probably take a little more risk, no risk, no reward. I think that will be helpful. Thank you for sharing that clip.
Have you not heard that before then?
I've heard of the speech, but I haven't listened to it entirely.
Because it's a fundamental flaw, isn't it? That we will quite often, as humans, go for the easy option. And what I'm finding out more and more in these conversations, and by getting emails from people and conversations that I have with my listeners, is more often than not, they are following a path that isn't even their own path. It's a path that they believe is the right one to take. It's either a path that generations have done in their family, so they kind of understand it, and their parents understand it, so they feel comfortable within that realm. And when I talk to them, they kind of go, well, to be honest, I never really wanted to do this anyway. I always wanted to be a vet, or I always wanted to be a tour guide. And so for you doing what you're doing, I think it plays totally into the words that Jim Carrey was saying, that you found the thing that lights you up inside and you've taken a chance on it. And if you can find that thing, I don't think it's much of a chance. Do you, Nick?
I don't think so either. I guess that's a great way to look at it. I should be very thankful and lucky that I get the chance to do this all the time.
But you did it. You got off your backside and you did it.
I did it. I did it with the help from a lot of people, and still with the help from a lot of people. And today, it's a lot of fun. We lead about 20 tours per week, and we have a staff of 14 or 15 people now here in New York City.
And do museums close at all?
I'm sorry?
Do museums close? Do they close on Sundays or Saturdays or whatever?
The museums don't close, the ones that we operate at. They do not close on a specific day, but they do have times at night that they close. Yes, sir.
So how is it structured then? So you are the CEO, you're the sort of owner of the company, and you have employees that you have brought on, or is it a kind of combined company that a few of you own together?
The business now is a limited liability corporation, and it's a sole proprietorship in that. So I'm the entire owner of the company. Our tour guides operate very much as their own guides. I do not tell them what to talk about. I don't tell them the objects or the galleries that they need to pick. We think it's important for the guides to pick their own material so that they can talk about things that they are excited about.
How do you know they're right, Ben? How do you know that they've learned and they're not just making it up?
That's a great question. The risk that I'm more concerned about is, like, we take facts very seriously, and occasionally we'll have art historians or art history majors come and audit the tours and give us feedback about facts that may be a little questionable. But I'm more interested in their energy levels and how do they manage the crowd, and do they make people feel comfortable. So don't get me wrong, the facts are important, and it's really important that we say that. But when we dive into a little bit of the gossip side of the art, much of that can't really be verified. So we do our best efforts, and we try to verify from as many sources as possible.
And that's what makes it interesting, though, isn't it? I was a financial trainer for years and years and years, and I used to do very boring training courses. And I used to do them as game shows. I used to do all kind of silly things. And was it on message? Kind of. Did the audience get it? Yes. Did the audience love it? Yes. And so I kind of went with it all the time, and it became my sort of name, really, that I would find a way of making something entertaining, even if it wasn't 100% accurate to what the company wanted.
I like that. I can just imagine you being running around, financial traders, data, information, getting everybody pumped up and excited. I love that.
Yeah, I used to do Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? That was a good one. I used to do sort of training courses like that. And I think deep down there's a kind of game show host element to me. That is certainly coming out on the mic here. It's one of those kind of things that once you start touching on vibes and passions and enthusiasm, you kind of morph into something slightly bigger and I suppose more accurate to your authentic self. Did you find that? Are you doing your performance, and it is a performance, it's a tour, but do you have it sometimes when you actually almost have an out-of-body experience where you know the content so well that you hear it coming out of your mouth even though your brain's thinking about what you're having for lunch tomorrow?
Wow, I'm so glad that you brought that up. That has happened to me before, and I have to really be careful because, you know what? When you're doing a live tour and people are looking at you and they're inches away from you, they can sense that immediately. Like, for me to record a speech or something, that's okay to go into the speech, right? You may have heard it before as I told that story of the first night when I was at the museum. If I go into a scripted routine during a tour and I'm not still connecting with people and making eye contact with them, it's a great, fantastic thing, but people can also know, oh, this guy's like not really here right now. So I love those out-of-body experiences. Sometimes I get so wrapped up, but if it's a scripted thing that I've said before, I really try to ground myself and bring myself back down, maybe even add in some hesitations in my speech or verbal fillers to just connect again with the audience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And the reason I ask that is many times in my life, I would know the content inside out, and I would find myself having these out-of-body experiences. And I used to love them. It was really interesting. And I had one that I actually split into 3 parts, and this is a bit weird actually, and I've shared it on a couple of shows, the earlier ones, when I was at work and I was really stressed, but I didn't know I was stressed, and I was doing a training course and I thought I had a heart attack, and I was talking to the audience and I was on the board writing away, and then suddenly wham in my heart, I thought, oh my God, I've had a heart attack. But I didn't stop, which I should have done. Looking back, I should have just said, excuse me, I don't feel very well. I think I'm going to pull this to an end. I carried on doing it. And as I was doing it, I was thinking to myself, my God, I've had a heart attack. What's the symptoms of a heart attack? Is it the left arm? Is it the right arm? Is it supposed to be fizzy? Have I got those symptoms? And then I started thinking, this is weird. My mouth is still talking. And I was talking about the sort of thing that I was supposed to be talking about. And then my brain kind of went, this is amazing. He's doing that, and you're thinking about heart attacks. And I had split into 3 parts. And it was the most fantastic sort of experience, other than the fact that I thought I was having a heart attack, and it turned out it wasn't. It was just stress. But I've never had that before in my life. And I've never had anything weird ever happen to me in my life at all. No sort of ghostly experiences or anything. And that's the closest thing, but I can't quite work out how I became 3 people just for that period of time.
As you were telling that story, I felt like I was going with you along on that heart attack ride. I think it certainly shows to your perseverance that you didn't just stop and you kept giving your speech.
Well, would you have stopped? Because you're actually in a different situation. I was paid to train people, but people had paid you. So if you're a tour guide and they've made a whole day to do it, and then suddenly the tour guide says, excuse me, I'm going to stop this because I think I'm having a heart attack. would you have just carried on?
David, are you asking me if I would stop a tour if I had a heart attack? Because while I am very passionately committed to my business, I do respect my health. And I think I don't think I can take the hero's journey to die in my light of work. I may take a momentary health check break. Please forgive me.
But you don't know if you're having it, do you? That's the thing.
That's true.
You know, if somebody says to you, excuse me, you are having a heart attack, you would go, fair enough, I'm stopping it. But if you don't really know what the symptoms are, you're just getting this pain, you kind of think, well, I don't want to stop here because I might look a bit stupid. And it might just be indigestion, or it might be what I ate last night, or whatever.
Yeah.
Would you stop if you didn't know, but you've got all these kind of symptoms going? I wasn't expecting to talk about this in this show, but it's interesting because you're a fellow stand-up talker.
Yeah. I think the example that you've presented is one where you chose not to stop and you pushed through and you had ultimately sort of a life-altering, or at least a sincerely memorable experience, one in which your personality kind of divulged into 3 instances. If I knew that I could push through the pain to guarantee that type of situation, you are damn right I would push through it. I would not even think twice.
There you go, Nick. You see, this is the nuts and bolts on Join Up Dots. You wasn't expecting to have this conversation. So,
no, I love it.
So if we went right back in time, the thing that sort of really interested me, and I laughed when I was reading it as well, was that day that you hired a film crew to follow yourself and your dad around Thailand, which, from my experience of people going to Thailand, the last thing you want to do is take your dad anyway, but you were there with a film crew. How did that happen?
We have some family friends who live in Bangkok, and so I've been going there. I had an internship in college. I know a very different side of Thailand, one in which I work downtown in a skyscraper. I insist, well, I can't say that I insist, but I really prefer these days to only travel with film crews because it makes your experience obviously so much better. You feel like a celebrity where you go, and the film crews guide you to all the best spots. I decided that I wanted to do this as a present for my father, to capture a day as we explored the city. And I looked on Craigslist and I searched all over the internet with the help of someone to find a film crew that I could hire just to film kind of slice of life, you know, 2 awkward American tourists walking around downtown situations, and found an amazing film crew, and they were more than willing to oblige. It wasn't a fancy video shoot. There was probably a crew of, 1 or 2 or 3 people, and they followed us around and they put the video together, and it was just the best photo. I think that's one little pro tip that I can give to people, and that is that I have never once regretted spending money to hire a photographer or a film crew. I did this for a friend of mine's birthday a few months ago. One of my best friends, his name is Charles, he had a birthday party and actually hired a professional photographer to come to the bar as he was having the party to just snap photos of him and my friends together. And that was my present to him. You can hire photographers relatively affordably. It was about the same cost as buying a couple drinks or a moderately nice present. And it was so fun. We just looked great at the bar, and everybody was really enjoying, and he got a kick out of it. He felt like a very famous person.
So would you quite like one of these kind of reality shows following you around?
I would hate it. No. I would hate it. It's funny for me to do it when I get to hire the crew, but I don't think I would like to be in front of it, no.
Right, the last thing that I'm going to talk about, and I've got a good question here, and this is one that I'm just going to hold back from a moment, but it's come to me 3 or 4 times during the conversation. But when the film The Night at the Museum came out, was that a big boost to your industry? Did people then start seeing museums in a different way, or has it had no impact at all in any shape or form?
Oh, it's absolutely had a positive impact, I think, because people simply talk about museums. Anything that gets people talking about museums, anything that shows people having fun inside the museum, I think is a great thing. So
you would, it's like Night at the Museum 3 coming out soon. You would like it to just keep on going on, 4s, 5s, 6.
I think nights in museums are very magical, And whenever you can go to a museum at night, I highly recommend people. Yes, I would love to have night at the museum 4, 5, 6. I could do nights at the museum all over the world. I could watch this nonstop.
Well, you have segued to my last question, across the world, because obviously we're talking about a business opportunity that you have created in New York, in the Met, in the Museum of Natural History. But this principle that you're talking about could be replicated across the globe. So it is totally scalable. And I imagine with the amount of audience that we've got, there's going to be 1, 2, 10, 15, 20, whatever, people listening to this thinking, I could do this. Our local museum's really boring. I'm in a big city. Why are they not doing it? And they could basically take your idea and create a business. Would that be something that would actually excite you, that you are inspiring people to bring museums alive across the world?
I would love that. I think that would be fantastic. And if you're listening to this and you're even contemplating it, listen to me. You can do this. I worked at an electronics company. I've never taken an art history class. I just started doing tours, showing my friends things that I liked. And as the experience that David talked about with the gentleman he had in Los Angeles, it's that real experience, right? It's having fun with your friends and showing them things that you want to talk about and that you're excited about. You could do this at a museum. You could do this in a downtown area. I think if you were looking for a side hustle or a little gig to do on weekends, that this would be a great opportunity.
Because a great opportunity for you would be the sort of training, isn't it? It's the scalable aspect. You've been doing this for a few years. You have learned what works, what doesn't, how long a speech should be, how much interaction you have to have with the kids against the adults and all those kind of things. So you would actually have a blueprint that would be very valuable for somebody who's sitting there thinking, I could do this.
I think, yeah, we definitely have a lot of knowledge that could be shared. I'm happy to share a lot of that for free with your listeners. The thing that we've come down is we have a formula, right? The tour business, I need to be clear about this. If you're thinking about starting a museum tour business, you're not going to get rich doing this. You're not going to become a decamillionaire. Museum tours are low tech and high touch, right? There's not a lot of technology that's easily scalable. You have families and kids and visitors who show up to your tours. Each have their own needs and distinct things. It's a great business and it is incredibly rewarding because you get to see people face to face, and I love working with that. But just know that if you're going into this, right, it's kind of a little bit of can of worms. I would suggest if you want to start to do these tours, just go out, do a tour with your friends, show them some things that you love, send me an email, info@museumhack.com, and we'll love to share them up on our Instagram or something. But tours, I think, and this is one thing that's important, the future of entertainment is the live experience, right? People are going to want more of the live experience. That's my future of entertainment, that I think that people are going to want and are going to pay for getting out of the house, getting off of the video game, stepping away from the computer and interacting with an individual.
So you think it's going to come full circle?
I don't think it's going to replace Oculus Rift or things like that. I think those are going to be fantastic, and I'm excited for those. Video games are only going to get better. Podcasts and website qualities are only going to improve. But I think there will be a very distinct, active, healthy market for that live experience.
Well, we're seeing that in sort of music, aren't we? Generally, people are buying less and less CDs and albums and stuff and going to concerts more and more. Subsequently, the price of a concert, there's a famous band, I'm not sure if they were huge in America, called Queen. And I went to see Queen. They were my second ever concert when I was a 15-year-old. And at Wembley Stadium, and I found my ticket the other day, and it was £23 to go and see Queen.
Wow.
And that was in 85, and now you'll probably be paying sort of £120 and stuff. So they have worked out that the value is in the live performance.
It is, right? That's something that can't be easily replicated. It's harder to copy, surely. That's a business that I'm interested in. I love live experiences. I'm a sucker. I did a food tour recently here in New York City, and I had a lot of fun.
Well, just before we put you on the sermon and the mic, I normally play this a little bit earlier, but it is the theme of the show, and I'll be very interested in your grasp on this and whether you think it's relevant to you and your life. This is the words of Steve Jobs that he made back in 2005 and is, as I say, we play it on a daily basis. So this is Steve Jobs.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever, because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart even when it leads you off the well-worn path, and that will make all the difference.
So are those words that now you're at your age, you can go, yes, they are relevant to me?
Yes, those are relevant to me. I like that. That was beautiful.
Have you not heard that before?
I've heard it before, but I haven't heard it enough, right? Some of these fantastic speeches, that's the second one you've played, I could probably do to listen to that every day as a source of motivation.
You know where you should get them? Join on Dots. It's a daily show.
I completely agree. If you're not already listening or subscribed, join on Dots, and please leave us a review on iTunes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the way to do it. So I'm going to send you back in time now, sir, and this is the part of the show which is the end, unfortunately, but it's the part that we join up your dots, and we send you back in time like a young time traveller. And if you could go back in time, what age Nick Gray would you speak to, and what advice would you give? So I'm going to play the theme tune, and when it fades out, you're up, and this is the Sermon on the Mic. Ooh, ah, ooh,
here we go with the best bit of the show, the Sermon on the Mic, the Sermon on the Mic. Ooh, ah, ooh.
Dear Nick from years ago, be mindful and kind to your body. It is the only one that you have. I encourage you to swing for the fences, go big or go home, care less about the little things, and keep having fun. That's it.
Do you think he would have listened to those?
That's a great question. I think absolutely not. I think it's so hard to take the advice that is so easy to give now in a completely different headspace. It's nice to have these moments to think about things and reflect. I've been struggling myself to develop a meditation practice. I talk to so many successful people that have encouraged me to meditate, and I've really struggled to get it down. It's boring to me, or for some reason I don't do it, but maybe one day I'll look back and say, you should have done that earlier.
Absolutely. That's what the show's all about. So, Nick, how can our audience connect with you?
The name of my business is Museum Hack, Hack. We love to just shout out to us on Twitter. We're Museum Hack. Our website is museumhack.com. If you're coming to New York and you are a listener of David and Join Up Dots, go to our website, send us an email. We'll give you a little coupon code to say thank you. And I encourage everybody, if you're thinking about doing a museum tour or just starting your own, your local museum will embrace you with arms wide open. Have fun.
Next time I'm in New York, and I've been there many, many times, I'm going to go to the museum because I've never been to the museum. And I want you, Nick. I don't want any of your underlings. I want you. And I want
You can't say that. My underlings they're not my underlings, first of all, but they are way smarter than me. I don't know if you really want me. My tour will just be about the top 10 things I want to steal.
But do you wear that bow tie that I'm looking at in the picture every single time?
I have abandoned the bow tie for the summer of 2014 in an attempt to find a girlfriend, so I'm less bow tie centric.
Because it was very Doctor Who, wasn't it? The last Doctor Who. We've just moved into a new Doctor Who. He was wearing a bow tie, and I thought that's where you've got that from.
Thank you. Thank you for the compliment. When you come to New York, we're going to make sure that you are a VIP at the very best museum in the entire world, the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
I will take you up on that. Nick, thank you so much for spending time with us today, joining up those dots. And please come back again when you have more dots to join up, because I do believe that by joining up the dots and connecting our pasts is the best way to build our futures. Nick Gray, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Listeners, have a great day.
David doesn't want you to become a faded version of the brilliant self you were once to become. So he's put together an amazing guide for you called the 8 Pieces of Advice That Every Successful Entrepreneur Practices, including the 2 that changed his life. Head over to joinupdots.com to download this amazing guide for free, and we'll see you tomorrow on Join Up Dots.